We have Brent crude oil up again this morning, up over 0.5% at 71.24, consolidating its move above $70 this week after spending much of the last week more in the 60s. Let's kick off this morning with Vibhuti Garg, Director South Asia at the IEEFA. Vibhuti, we had the Federal Reserve in the United States overnight saying, leaving rates unchanged, but saying it sees slower growth and higher inflation through 2025. And even though oil prices have risen this morning for whatever different reasons, will the Fed's outlook be bullish or bearish for oil prices this year, do you think?
Hi, everyone. Sean, on the question of how it's gonna look like, definitely in some parts of the world, it's also the whole sentiment of these new tariff and non-tariff barriers that are being created. And that will lead to definitely high inflation. And that will, in fact, have a ripple effect on the whole economic growth. So with higher interest rates, weakening of currency. So there's a lot more macroeconomic impact, which is, as I said, there's a ripple effect of such barriers kind of being implemented, and it's very retaliatory in nature. So, how US will impose some of these barriers, and then how the other countries are going to react. So definitely we will see some level of higher inflation because as a result, the end product prices will increase. And
I mean, slower growth and higher inflation is usually called stagflation, isn't it?
It is. But on the
worst, the worst disease of the economist world.
Yesterday, Mr. Jaishankar, India's External Affairs Minister, said, countries are using or weaponization of economic activities, which can be detrimental for sure. And as you rightly said, this kind of stagflation. But on the other hand, I would say there is some positive hope as well, because there's a lot of economic growth in some of the global south they are experiencing. So, for example, I can say for India, despite all this, we will be seeing some positive growth in terms of demand, and especially when we were talking about how these global climate change incidences of heat waves and all are increasingly having a very positive impact in terms of higher demand for energy. So that's also kind of...
There's all of these sort of mixed bearish and bullish signals. Right. Let's go to Mehmet Ogutu, who is joining us today from, I think he's where are you? Turkey now. So I thought you was going to be, it looked like your flag from a distance until I put on my glasses was China, but it's Turkey. There was But nonetheless, Mehmet, Group CEO, Global Resources Partnership Chairman at the London Energy Club. Mehmet, we're seeing oil prices rising despite this sort of somewhat damper global economic growth outlook. It seems geopolitical risk premium is back in the in inflating these oil prices. Your thoughts on, has the sort of peace efforts, the Trump whatever peace efforts, let's call them that, in Russia and the Middle East failed now that we're seeing the bombs still falling and restarted here tragically in Gaza?
Well, as you said, geopolitical tensions started to increase again, and Trump gave so much hope in the beginning, saying that even before he resumed the presidency at the White House, he will solve the Russian-Ukraine war problem.
24 hours, I think, was the quote.
Yes. So now probably he might have to change it to 24 months. And what's happening is on the ground is quite different, of course. First, we see in Gaza what happened, his efforts for the ceasefire to hold, the hostages released. And yesterday, the day before yesterday, attacks killing more than 400 people again, and turning Gaza into a Riviera of the Middle East has not happened, and there is no likelihood that it is going to happen. Whereas in Russia, Ukraine, he weakened the hands of Ukrainians in the beginning with the fiasco at White House, you remember, with Zelensky. And now Putin is persisting in his demands, and even a ceasefire was not agreed, except a 30-day suspension of attacks on the energy infrastructure, part of the deal. Therefore,
Which you'd have to say probably, I mean, obviously Ukraine has been bashed so much in the last 3 years, but a ceasefire on energy infrastructure has to be more to Russia's gain than Ukraine's, one would think.
Yeah, nothing is left already in Ukraine to protect in terms of energy
Except the nuclear
infrastructure.
power stations, and I think Trump has clearly said they're off limits.
Also, Trump was suggesting that perhaps US might take control of the power plants in Ukraine to protect them from Russian attacks. So very strange ideas floating around, but I think if it continues that way, without any concrete result, Trump will lose credibility. And then this is also going to be reflected on the international markets. And then also another warning came from Trump in a letter to the Iranian President Khamenei, saying that you have 2 months for a nuclear deal. I mean, this has been ongoing for ages almost, and nothing happened.
Those 2 months are nearly up now.
Yes. So what's going to happen then if Iran fails?
Well, a lot of bombs dropping in Yemen, in the Sana'a and so forth.
Yes, and this might be an indication, because I think there was a concerted plan or scenario in terms of how to wipe out the Iranian influence in the region, starting with Gaza, then Hezbollah, and then in Syria, and now in Yemen, Houthis, and next will be the target will be Iran. If they don't, they will say that, well, we already gave the warning and it didn't happen. So military action, White House is keeping it quite open. And so we might expect, as we have been speculating for a long time in this series as well, that a US attack might be imminent if Iran doesn't take action that US and other European countries want, especially Israel wants.
Let's go to Denmark, where Arne Lohmann Rasmussen, Chief Analyst and Head of Research at Global Risk Management. Arne, give us your thoughts on this sort of dichotomy, with the Fed on one hand saying slower growth, higher inflation, bad, bearish, one would think. And then on the other side of the coin, we have this, as Mehmet points out, a resurgence of these live explosive conflicts. How do you see those two things going forward?
Good morning, Sean. I think it's important, if we look at the Fed meeting yesterday, the key word was actually transitory.
I know, I thought that was a bad word to use after
exactly.
the last time he used it.
Yeah, because that can hit you in the back, and I'm afraid it's going to hit them in the back. And for those who are not sort of remember the story, that is like 3 years ago, or 2021. Powell used this on inflation before inflation picked up during the pandemic, that the inflation would be transitory, that they could keep interest rates at 0 and so on. And fast forward 12 months, inflation was at 10%. It was not transitory. I actually remember him saying back then that we're not even there where we're going to talk about hiking rates.
It's such a reckless word to use because of that.
It's a bit like when I hear Trump, I hear Scott Bessent saying that, yeah, we're in for a rough time, but don't worry, guys, down the road we have Nirvana. It may not play out that way. This is really dangerous what they're playing in, but obviously the market is buying into this narrative that this is going to be transitory. As an economist, tariffs are by definition transitory, because it's a lift of the price level and then you stay there. But this is tariffs on an unprecedented level. It's changes in,
and it hasn't even come yet, right? The big day is April 2nd.
Go and ask if you ask the consumers, they believe inflation will be 5% in 1 year's time. Of course, if you also kick out all the foreigners, of course they're going to ask for high pay raises and so on. This is a huge experiment with the U.S. economy, and it's going to go badly. I think we saw the OECD really warning about this. I think the Fed is aware of this. Maybe they use this transitory not to sort of stir up the fight with Trump, who obviously wants to have rates cut. They may end up cutting rates, because if the economy really weakens, they will probably stick to the transitory. But yes, that is what the market is rallying on, transitory. Okay, they're not going to hike rates, they can cut rates, we've got a weak numbers and so on. So in that respect, that was why equities were in green yesterday, supporting equities. The dollar was weakening, supporting oil and so on. So for the time being, probably a better risk appetite that we have seen over the last month or two, fueled by Fed. And then on the other hand side, I think as Mehmet said, the key to the geopolitical angle is very much Iran, of course. That is where you can really impact physical flows. Russia, Ukraine, of course, also have an impact. I believe actually that the sanctions from the US are de facto gone. Because you don't respect them if you believe that they will not be sort of, the compliance will be low if you believe, okay, the US is not going to do anything if you break them. And by the way, they're probably going to lift them in a very short time.
The problem with that, of course, from the point of view of flows, is insurance companies can't play that risk.
Of course, but yes, of course, they still have an impact. We see Russian seaborne export is picking up again. We see some of the Chinese, some of the Indian refineries are accepting oil again. But yes, they're still in place. But when they lift them, of course, they will have a positive impact. But Russian production is probably still capped by the OPEC Plus membership. I don't think they're ready to give that up. Who knows? But Iran is, of course, the key here. And I share Mehmet's view. I think there's a huge risk. I'm really concerned that they're going to do what they did in Yemen. We saw attacks in Yemen. We saw the bombing in Gaza. It's very
and
easy
ruthless on a scale that is just pure brutality,
unprecedented. It's really, really sad to look at. And the next, of course, is are they going to do this to Kark Island or whatever? I don't know. But yes, this is.
Well, they'd be playing with high-risk poker there, because inevitably that would have a big consequence in the inflation in the US when we see oil prices at $150 a barrel. Let's go to India again. We'll come back to you, Arne, on that point.
Yeah, sure.
Vibhuti, we haven't heard much of where India stands on this Trump tariff policy. We've obviously had the visit by Narendra Modi to Washington, and they seem like they're best buddies and everything. But tariffs are coming your way like they're coming all over the world on April 2nd. Is India's economy insulated from Trump's tariffs?
Well, it's going to be a wait and watch. We will see what the two leaders spoke and what's the kind of tariff repercussions the country will have on April 2nd. But definitely, all these things takes a little bit of time. And that's what we are sensing, that there will definitely be an impact. It may not be very high, because the kind of tariff we are seeing, what India has imposed, because it's like tariff for a tariff or an eye for an eye, that kind of a policy. So India has imposed higher tariffs than what US has imposed on Indian products. So the differential is not extremely high between the two countries. So if there is a reciprocatory tariff increase, that definitely will have some impact. And as we were talking about,
your expectation is that India will meet the sort of tariff face on, a bit like the Canadian approach. They're not going to take the Chinese approach, which has been to dodge a little bit and dodge here and there, but not to face off. India will meet dollar for dollar on the tariff?
We'll have to see. But there are other trade deals being discussed as well. What level of investments are going to come, what kind of other industries, US industries are going to come to India. So if those kind of decisions will hurt US, if they start putting higher and higher tariffs on India's import. So I think both countries are working out a deal which is a win-win situation. So as I said, we don't know yet whether they will be.
I know, that's why we have you on, because we don't know, and we want your opinion on what you think is going to happen. That's the whole point. Will we see a splinter in the bromance between Trump and Modi? Are they going to still love each other after 25% tariffs go flying across the oceans.
That won't be the case. If those higher kind of tariffs will be imposed, there will be some, as I said, retaliatory kind of announcements that you can expect from India then in that case.
Mehmet, looking to the state of play in Russia and with Trump and Zelensky, you sort of articulated the journey of the last few weeks there. Are we in a position to say that the US, Washington, is back in the camp of Kyiv? They're providing weapons to fight the Russians. What's your sense of where that sort of what we saw, the fracture in the Western alliance in the aftermath of the meeting in the White House with Zelensky? Germany this week passed a bill to $1 trillion for sort of total transformation of its debt markets and budgets for defense. Where is that Western alliance? Where is that US? We're on the side of democracy and Kyiv rather than we're kind of neutral, but sort of with Putin, do you think, now that we've had this phone call and a few weeks has passed since the meeting in the White House?
Well, as you know, trust is the cornerstone of everything you deal with. And Europeans lost trust in Trump. That's the reason why there was a panic about the new European security architecture and how could Europeans beef up their own security without being under the US security umbrella. And they don't trust Putin either. So therefore, they are in a deadlock somehow. And I don't think that US-European relations will be the same again. However, as Putin is playing his game, because nobody can play chess game better than him with a cold face, even vis-a-vis Trump. And when he realized that and his team, I think the approach might change. As you see, even the ceasefire, simple ceasefire is not holding with Putin, then Trump is losing his face. And but also even within Europe, some of the countries, including Germany, Hungary, of course, are pushing for the resumption of Russian gas imports. Not officially yet, but in the expectation that there might be, at the end of the road, some ceasefire or peace deal, whatever form it takes. And they are considering how to bring back Russian gas because it hit them so badly in terms of price increases, in terms of unreliability of other options. Then we were talking about the Federal Reserve meeting, but there was also a meeting in Washington. We shouldn't lose sight of that, between Trump and the chief executives of major oil companies in the US, including Chevron, ExxonMobil, Hess, and
his support
Marathon.
group, those who cheerleaded him in the election, funded his re-election, and
yes.
and
Now
now are they happy?
They are happy because they said there was a meeting of energy leaders at White House, but when you look at them, they are all drill baby drill companies, all and gas companies. And Trump's objective is to lower the oil prices in the domestic market so that there will not be any inflationist pressure.
Well, apparently the reporting out of the meeting was that they told him that they can't expect to have more oil production if oil prices are falling. We need higher prices.
There's a dichotomy there because the objective is to increase the oil production in the US by another 3 million barrels. How is this going to happen if the prices are below $70? So, but it seems that they will reach an agreement on that, and Trump is a pragmatic person to change his course of action. And in terms of tariffs, you discussed whether India will be another target. I don't think it's going to happen soon because Trump and his team are going step by step, because there are other regions where tariffs didn't hit the ground yet, including in the Middle East and the Gulf. There wasn't any indication of Trump's or against Turkey. And India and other countries perhaps will be in the waiting list. First, he wants to get the results from Canada, Mexico, China, and European Union first.
He wants to fight his friends first before he goes
Yes.
to further afield. Arne, speaking of friends in the European Union and the points made there about Germany, How big of a moment is this, do you think, sitting in Copenhagen, sitting on the doorstep of the Baltics there and the Baltic Sea, and the change in Germany's the big decision this week? Is this a pivot moment? Does it feel like that? Is that a bit too much air in the bottle?
No, this is Europe racing to the occasion. This is Draghi's, we will do whatever it takes. That was the former ECB president during the debt crisis. I think this is a pivotal moment. It is Germany saying, okay, we're gonna do this. We're gonna spend our money on this, and this is a huge amount of money. It is unprecedented, and we see it, and financial markets are buying into it. DAX, what is it up? 18% this year. Nasdaq down 10%. Euro up 5-6% alone here in March. This is a pivotal moment. It is the moment where Europe realized, okay, we are on our own. So we got to build our military. We're gonna safeguard the borders. We're gonna kickstart the economy, and we can be happy that sort of Germany have had this Schuldenbremse, this debt rule, so they didn't have a lot of debt, so they can actually do this. They have a very low debt compared to the US, by the way. So yes, I think this is a pivotal moment in Europe. We also see other developments. We see a bit of rollback on regulation, for example. I think von der Leyen is really good on this. Something called the CSRD, which is a monster for companies, is being rolled back. I don't think it will be the last regulation being rolled back. It's a much more pragmatic approach by the new EU Commission. So I'm actually a bit optimistic on Europe for
with the
change.
support of the new German government to follow with that, I would think, in terms of does do whatever it takes include what Mehmet referenced there, that Germany would turn back on that Nord Stream 2 pipeline?
It's a very good question. I wrote a LinkedIn post on this on Monday. My take is that there's not going to be any Russian gas this year, but I would not rule it out. Pipeline gas or extra pipeline gas next year. There are also some rulings against Gazprom, which from a technical point of view makes it very difficult. I think this whole idea about opening Nord Stream, which one was it that they blew up? I can't even remember. Nord Stream 1 or Nord Stream 2, that should flow. I think it's not going to happen. This is a bit far-fetched. I know it was a headline article on Financial Times and all that, but of course, gas through Ukraine. Will Ukraine buy into that?
Well, I suppose it all depends if Ukraine and EU are actually at the negotiation table with Russia, so they feel they've some ownership of the deal. If they do have ownership, then they can...
Or they get a decent pay for it, because that's also a solution, that you actually say, okay, you can sell gas to Europe, but you will have to pay a healthy transport fee to Ukraine to rebuild the country. Then it will also be more politically acceptable in Europe if that happened. I think actually Kellogg, the special envoy that was sort of banned from Moscow, he actually came up with this proposal.
He seems to be a reasonable mind in the midst of all of that sound and fury of that new Trump team.
Let's go to the That's why they didn't want him in Moscow, exactly. Of course.
Get rid of that guy. Let's go to the survey question and get a sense of the room here. Fed sees slower growth and higher inflation through 2025. Will that be bullish or bearish for oil prices this year? This morning, it's clearly bullish in the sense that the markets are going up after these comments by the Fed chair yesterday. But as the market digests the full dimension of this, is this a sugar rush relief rally after some weeks of fairly significant falls in the financial markets? With the Fed see slower growth and higher inflation, the worst combination, will that be bullish or bearish for oil prices going forward? We'll have to wait and see. Vibhuti, where are we at with the health of India's industries? Are current oil prices now, let's say 70 on Brent? It's sort of the low we had of the range. We had sort of an 80 average last year. We're down to a 70 average this year. Is the health of Indian industries, the current oil prices support growth for them? We have multiple global agencies downgrading India's growth this year.
So even after downgrading, you have to see it's around 6%. What we were earlier predicting was 7.5%, 8%. So downgrading, yes, but not like it's gonna be just 1 or 2%. It's still very high. 6.5% is not a small economic growth rate to witness. And in terms of the health of the Indian industries on account of oil prices, it is a kind of a double whammy. But we have been in situations where the oil prices were more than $80 per barrel, or even higher than $100 per barrel. That's when it started hitting us. If it's in the range of 70s, between 70 to 75, I think the Indian industries are well insulated in that sense. They can still be resilient, they can still manage to pass on that kind of a cost. And in India, we did see this year both WPI, the wholesale price inflation, as well as consumer price inflation has gone down. And while Fed has not increased the rates, but RBI, our central bank, has reduced the interest rates in the country by 25 basis points. And it is further expected that another 25 basis points are on the horizon. And further towards the end of the year, another 25 basis points. So there are very strong signals. There has been a lot of liquidity infusion as well to maintain a stable economic growth and keep the interest rates lower and lower. So I think India, on the other hand, is taking other extreme steps to infuse.
So we can hit that 6% this year. That would be not under risk. I mean, downgrade from an 8 to 6, but it should hold at 6.
Yes, indeed.
Mehmet, I wanted to take the opportunity to go a bit local with you. Of course, Turkey's all over the headlines this morning after the arrest of the main opposition figure who has been detained. But it appears to the efforts to disqualify him for running in presidential elections. Can you give us a bit of insight on the ground there? Is this a significant deal? What's it look like?
Well, it was difficult to believe what happened, actually. I call it the İmamoğlu earthquake in Turkey, because he was a very popular mayor of Istanbul, elected with huge margin in the last election, because President Erdogan used to say that if you lose Istanbul, you lose Turkey in the election. So now he emerged as a powerful contender for the presidential election coming up. And I believe that this year is the year of election in Turkey, although the normal election time is not due until 2028, because Erdogan would like to remain in power. Normally under constitution, it is only 2 terms, but he wants to extend it like Putin did probably. And he was the only powerful challenger. And on Sunday, he was going to be nominated officially by his party as a presidential candidate. And then things started to flow very quickly. First, his diploma was canceled by the university 31 years after he acquired it, saying that there was an irregularity, legally speaking.
And you have to have a degree to run for president.
You have to have the university degree to run for president. And then again, coincidentally, he was blamed to be collaborating with a political party for elections, which is supporting what Ankara believes related to PKK. But Ankara itself is negotiating with PKK for a deal to dismantle it, talking to its leaders, while the mayor is accused of terrorist links. If terrorist link, as Ankara put it, will be proven somehow, or he will be indicted on that basis, then the government can appoint a political person, a civil servant actually, as the caretaker mayor of Istanbul. This will be another terrible blow. And so there were some protests, of course. It was banned. And so this is not good news when we were expecting in Turkey things to go better. For Turkey's greater role in the region, you have to have solidarity domestically and political economic stability. It looks that it's going to be a year of election this year, and also constitutional amendment, whether before election or after election. And these are not
And
good
the foreign
news.
investors will have gone running away again, burnt once again by this
They did.
false Erdogan dawn, it seems.
And
Arne-
also domestic capital started to flee as well to safe havens outside the country. This is not good news, as I said. But Turkey's importance is increasing in the eyes of Europeans before what we discussed about the new European security architecture. Turkey being the second largest military in NATO after the United States, and EU is looking into Turkey whether it could be a major part of the new European energy security system beyond NATO. But Turkey has its, of course, conditions. So it's not going to be a new outpost, military outpost for EU. But if it is fully integrated into EU, this is something that they can discuss.
Yeah, that'll be a challenge given the backdrop of what we just discussed. Arne, quickly on your little in-country dilemmas. Greenland had an election this week or the last weekend, and the results, obviously it's a small population, but nonetheless there was a result. How is that looking now? What's the sentiment now that there is an election result in Greenland?
I think the election results showed that those parties sort of supporting a cohesion with Denmark, that this should be a slow process, that they're going to go on their own. They were the one who won the election. So this was a signal to the US. We are not ready to give up our independence to the US. Does the White House care about the election? I don't think so. But we have also seen the Danish Prime Minister standing more firm behind Greenland. I think he was a bit afraid of that to start with, not sort of provoking the White House. I think we are moving closer together here. We saw also von der Leyen a lot of support to Greenland, but of course it was a bit of a shock when we saw Mark Rutte, the NATO secretary in the White House, sort of just laughing when this issue came up. This is quite a serious issue. This is about an ally taking over a 98% of the Danish kingdom. So yes.
I would not be putting too much faith in Mr. Rutte to be anything other than on the end of a string of Trump. He's. I don't think he's going to stand for Europe's interests as much as one might like to think he will, given that he is a long-standing Dutch prime minister. Anyway, we'll have to leave it there. Lots of issues on the table. And with it, oil prices, while moving up, you'd have to say are still caught in that $70 Brent plus $1 or $2 up, plus minus $1 or $2 down. Nothing definitive yet to break out either direction. Will one of these issues that we've talked about today sort of inflame and become it? Will we see, as Mehmet in the signal there, potential for the Iran issue to flare up again with Trump's 2-month warning? Is the bombings of Yemen, the foothills of a bombing into Iran? Lots to think about, to keep an eye on. But at the moment, Brent crude oil trading at 71.24. Thank you so much to have you all. Mehmet from Turkey, Vibhuti, of course, in India, and Arne Lohmann in Denmark. What an international flavor it is. Really great to have your insights today. Have a wonderful weekend and look forward to seeing you all soon. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.